next session is called Charting Your Own Path. Basically, you're in the driver's seat. What are you going to do? Are you going to drive this with your seatbelt on, or are you going to go all guns blazing? Well, ladies and gentlemen, being an entrepreneur, as we already mentioned, is not easy. The second you decide to become an entrepreneur, you embrace ambiguity, and you are faced with challenges every single day. Female founders especially, we succeed because we have this unwavering belief. We have a laser focus and we have persistence. I mean, come on. You are women, mothers, wives, sisters. You are the whole gamut of things. So thank you very, very much for coming and putting yourself first right here today and tomorrow. Our first speaker today has proven that you can have your way. The question is, do you know what your way is? The point is, go out there, focus, and drive your passion end to end. The speaker I'm about to invite has a very, very long title because that's the number of years she's put in to be where she is today. She has worked with eminent multinationals like the Coca-Cola Company, the Cadbury Schweppes PLC in a variety of marketing, general management, and chief executive officer roles in the United Kingdom, Nigeria, South Africa, Latin America, and the United States of America. In addition to this, she has also been a pivotal part of the Britannia Industries Limited here in India. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it's my honor to welcome the non-executive director at Bunge Ltd, Smith & Nephew PLC, Crisil Limited, and Syngene International Limited, Vinita Bali. Please welcome.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction, I would say. And as I understand, what we're doing is we will divide the session into two. I'll make a few opening remarks, and then Ganesh, if I've got it right, you will then come in and help moderate the rest of the discussion and questions from the audience, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with all of you, rather to interact with all of you. I think this is a very important initiative, and it's great to have iconic companies like, Goldman Sachs, and iconic institutions like IIM Bangalore, together with the NSRCEL, putting a program such as this together. I was asked to speak on charting your own path. And in a sense, I think it is you, all of you, who have taught us what that means, because you have made that one courageous decision actually to chart your own path by determining or deciding that you want to become entrepreneurs. And I think a lot has been said about sessions like this being a source of empowering, all of you. But I actually want you to think of it the other way around. Nobody is empowering you. You have empowered yourself, and you have made the decision that you want to be an entrepreneur, that you will do this on your own terms. So I think we have to think about, I would urge all of you to think about it a little bit differently. The world might say that I am empowering you to do something, but actually that's not right. The fact that you've decided that you want to be an entrepreneur is the first, as I said earlier, and the most important decision that you have made. Because what is it that differentiates entrepreneurs from, let's say, professionals like me? What distinguishes you really is that you have an idea that you are convinced about. You have a passion that you can actually make that idea come alive, and you give it everything that you have to activate that idea. I think that spirit is quite a unique spirit, because it is very well for most of us to say, I'll work for a large organization. There is a certain security around it. With a professional degree, it's easy to get those jobs. And yes, we've all been entrepreneurial in the professional careers that we've had. But I think what again distinguishes all of you is that you have chosen to actually create the path that you will walk on. And in the process, you are doing a number of other things. You're giving employment to so many other people. You're following your dream and your passion. You are doing what you like to do best. As somebody said, take up something that you like to do and you'll never have to work a single day in your life. I think that's exactly what all of you have chosen to do. And entrepreneurship comes with its own set of, risks. As entrepreneurs, you've taken a risk on putting your capital, or you've taken the responsibility to put somebody's other capital into your business, primarily because you are convinced that the idea that you have has the possibility and a very high probability of generating sustainable returns for all your stakeholders, whether it's your employees or people you've borrowed from, or other supporters that you have had. And I think that's a very big responsibility, and it's a responsibility that you have taken quite willingly, quite knowingly, and it's a great place to be in. If you look at India, India is not the large industry, and India is not the companies that are listed on our stock exchange. Of course it is. I'm exaggerating to make the point. But if we believe that all of India is what we see on our stock exchange and listed companies and a valuation of $3 trillion, we are missing a very, very big point. India is 6.5 crore MSMEs. These MSMEs employ less than 20 people. A lot of you probably will start in a position like that and grow much beyond that. And I think that is the beauty of India. That is the beauty of entrepreneurship. That is the beauty of what you're doing. So remember that you contribute to a much bigger India, which is largely unseen, not spoken about very much because, CNBC decides to concentrate on NSE and BSE listed companies. But the true India is the India that you are making. The true India is the India that people like you have invested in. And that is what is going to be the huge big differentiator. So I want to simply say, congratulations to all of you, because you have charted your own path. I also want to say to you, be confident about what you're doing. The only responsibility you have is really to yourself and to all your stakeholders. And therefore, as an entrepreneur, there are two things that become very important. One is, of course, the passion or the madness of your idea. And the second is your ability to create a business model that will deliver that idea to your customers or your consumers every day in such a manner that the proposition becomes commercially viable. Because in the absence of commercial viability, great ideas lead to nowhere. And entrepreneurship is not about finding the idea. Entrepreneurship is as much about finding the idea as it is about creating a business model for that idea that will make it commercially viable for you to earn, reasonable returns from your business, that will make it possible for you to generate employment that we've talked about, that will make it possible for society to benefit as a result of the initiative that you have taken and as a result of your willingness to put in that hard work behind that initiative. So with these few words, I'm going to turn it over to Ganesh to guide the questions and the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vinita ma'am, for that wonderful, upbeat conversation. And honestly, telling these wonderful women who've joined us from different parts of the globe that it's actually within them to make the change that they want to see. Well, you actually did a part of my job already, and you did it so well by introducing Anand Sri Ganesh. But I'm just going to take the liberty of inviting Chief Operating Officer NSRCEL, Anand Sri Ganesh, to take this conversation forward with Vinita. Please take this conversation over. You are the moderator of the session.
Thank you, Ms. Vinita Bali. That was truly inspiring, even if I say so myself, for all of us at NSRCEL and for all the entrepreneurs that we work with. Before I get on with a few questions I have for you, for all of us in the audience, if you got any thoughts, any feedback, any questions for Ms. Bali, please drop it in the chat box. I shall pick them up and share it for her comments. Ma'am, the first question I have is something you said about being courageous. Especially over the past few months, through the pandemic months, many of the entrepreneurs that we worked with are also grappling with that ambiguity. And they have to lead through that ambiguity when they themselves don't know what tomorrow might bring. And they're leading, as you said, their investors, their teams, their suppliers, their customers. You have faced similar situations possibly through your career as well. How would you guide our entrepreneurs through this phase where we don't know what tomorrow will look like?
Thank you for that question, Ganesh. And yes, whether you're a professional or an entrepreneur or as an individual, I mean, we're living with our families, we're making decisions on a day-to-day basis. All of you are deciding, some of you probably are in a situation where your children have got admission into a university overseas and you're figuring out what to do. So ambiguity, we have to accept as part of life. And, entrepreneurship is another part of life. So I think once we accept that there is going to be a certain amount of ambiguity, and in this case, it was, a very surprising ambiguity that was thrust upon the entire world 2 years ago. And I think we've worked our way through that ambiguity. So part of ambiguity is, first of all, to accept that it is going to be with us. Nobody can really, foresee the future or predict it accurately. I think what all of us have a responsibility to do is to develop that ability to deal with ambiguity and to not be crushed under ambiguity. There is uncertainty, the famous VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, etc. So, that is the world we are living in. Tomorrow, there is all this great talk about climate change and so on. Frankly, none of us know, what that will look like. Today, we know what it looks like because suddenly there is unseasonal rain, there are all kinds of things. But we are living in a world where we are seeing the consequences of decisions that were made many, many years ago. So let us not be afraid of ambiguity. Let us not be, cynical about it either. Let us not be indifferent to it. I think we have to be accepting of ambiguity, and part of our own individual journey, professional journey, entrepreneurial journey is to be able to establish or develop the skills to deal with this ambiguity. Because, frankly, that same ambiguity is facing everybody. So I'm neither better off nor worse off. How I deal with that ambiguity is really, to a large extent, a function of my attitude. Again, I'd go back to, you see, a glass half full or half empty. That is attitude. I think the differentiator in today's world is attitude. I can get the knowledge, I can outsource the skills, I can go and buy virtually anything. But can I go and buy my attitude? The answer is no. My attitude has to come from me.
I have a follow-up to that, especially because you said attitude, and I'm going to interpret it from an entrepreneurship perspective in so many ways as leadership. You're leading your teams, your partners, your investors through this ambiguity while you yourself are grappling with. And you spoke about managing our personalities as well. For a woman entrepreneur, and ma'am, you yourself as a luminary woman leader, are there unique dimensions to this element of leadership that one can tap into?
Personally, and I've spoken about this a lot, I don't think leadership has anything to do with gender. Leadership is gender agnostic, because leadership is a set of behaviors, which is really nothing to do with my gender. Leadership is, at its simplest, it's about taking ownership for an outcome. It is about taking accountability for what you do. It is about the responsibility you undertake. And most of all, leadership is about character. It is about working with ethics. It is about, finding solutions to problems, not being, inundated with problems, not being sort of compromised because you've got problems that you can't deal with. So leadership has nothing to do with gender. I think what perhaps you're alluding to is, it is still an unequal world. I hate to admit it. Women entrepreneurs are looked at differently from their male counterparts, even though we've had very, very successful, female entrepreneurs who have also just demonstrated through an IPO the kind of valuations that they can command and so on. So I think what we have to work on is the question is, or the answer to the question, which is our current ecosystem equitable and fair to entrepreneurs irrespective of gender? And I think those of us who can influence that thinking, which is to say, evaluate an idea on its merit, not on who has brought that idea to you. And if you're concentrating on who has brought that idea to you, look at their track record. Do not look at their gender. Look at their qualifications. Look at what they have done and not their gender. I think if there is any work to be done, whether it is through the NSRCEL, IIM, Goldman Sachs, other organizations that are involved in this entrepreneurial journey, I think that has to be for people like us. How do we make that entrepreneurial ecosystem equitable and fair? Which right now, I hate to admit, it necessarily is not.
You said many points that I took notes on, and I'm going to pick some of them. I do have a very interesting question that I was thinking about last night for this conversation. I'm going to read it verbatim, ma'am. Male dominance in government offices like the FSSAI and have unfriendly approaches towards women, which makes things doubly challenging for women. How do we overcome that? Which is, as I engage with my partners, there is a bias that has probably arisen through generations, good or bad. And as entrepreneurs, you have to grapple with them, you have to deal with them, you have to overcome them. How do we overcome that?
Whether you look at an office or an institution or an NGO or whatever, it's a microcosm of our society. So it's not as though you walk into an office and suddenly that office starts behaving differently from the rest of our society. Think about where, conditioning starts from. It starts from our homes. It is repeated over a period of time. And therefore, we know that women's participation in the labor force used to be 26%. It is now less than that. We're talking about global multinationals, who talk about diversity and inclusion and so on. And the best that we can get to is 26 to 30%. So, we have to call a spade and say that an office, you named FSSAI. And by the way, FSSAI has a fairly high number of women compared to many other offices.
True.
That they are disproportionately higher. I happen to know them because I work with them in my nutrition related work. But that's not the point. I think the point really is that mindset. And that's where I come back to attitude. That mindset change has to start with each of us, whether we are sitting in a government office, sitting in a private investment bank, sitting in an academic institution, or anywhere else. And I think if we become aware of what those, unconscious, unconditional, unconditioned, actually in this case, very conditioned biases are, And if there is a desire to change them, we can and we will. But if status quo becomes the norm, then it's going to be a very, very slow increase. I mean, I'm amazed sitting on boards, we are still talking about diversity and inclusion as though it were something that was, invented recently. We've been talking about it for a long time. And where you see progress, and where you see progress is where somebody comes in and says, if you're not doing it voluntarily, then we are going to legislate it. So, 40% of the board has to be women. And guess what? There are enough qualified women out there who these boards then go and find. And then, we do work and we say, okay, boards which have women actually tend to do better and so on and so forth. But the question is not a particular organization. The question is our society.
Got it, ma'am. I do hope we live up to your expectations.
It's our expectations, I mean, we all have to say,
I agree. Absolutely.
If your daughter has to face the same, issues that, let's say, your spouse or your sister or somebody from your generation has had to face, then we as a society have let ourselves down.
Yep.
And all of us, men and women, have to assume responsibility for that.
I completely agree. You did speak about your experiences when you went to South Africa and then and your experiences in Chile in a macho environment, as you said. So, although they're a great footballing nation, there's a question that probably alludes to that quite directly. I'm going to read it verbatim again. Being a young entrepreneur, I find it difficult to get people to take me seriously as a figure of authority. How do I deal with this?
It's interesting you asked this question. In many ways, I have kind of faced this professionally all my life. Where I was either the youngest manager or the youngest senior manager or whatever. And I can tell you how I dealt with it. I think if people start concentrating on aspects of you, if you let them. And what do I mean by that? If you go in there and the focus is really on competency, the focus is really on the discussion or the issue at hand, and when people see you as someone who is thoughtful, as someone who knows what they're talking about, as someone who is knowledgeable, as someone who is a problem solver, as someone who's a creative thinker, etc. They forget about your age. In a way, they forget about your gender. And I can tell you, through personal experience, I think if we were to convince ourselves that the only discussion should be around competency and not gender and not age and not ethnicity and not anything else, you will find that over a period of time, people don't even think about that when they see you. People see you as someone who is responsible. People see you as someone who's competent. People see you as someone who knows what they're talking about. And all of those things then matter a lot more than your age or your gender.
That's interesting. How much of this, if I may, has to do with conditioning one's personality? And Sanjay spoke about this in his keynote. If I could, he said, you can't build something until you've built yourself. In so many ways, in fact, what you're also saying is find a mental pivot. What does it mean for a woman entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think building yourself starts from what you see in your home, what you see in your school, what you see around you, and so on. Which is why I think if we accept that entrepreneurship exists in a larger ecosystem, we are nothing but slivers of a very large ecosystem. And we are dealing with an ecosystem where there are many instances of bias creeping in, either conscious or unconscious bias, which is certain people are expected to behave in this manner. And, right now, it's not just to do with gender. It has to do with so many other dimensions of individuals. It has to do with your community, your ethnicity, and so on, which is a very polarizing way of seeing the world. If we see an ecosystem and we say, in this ecosystem, if we truly believe that the best athlete will get selected on the team, that the people who are most competent will rise to the top, and they will pull up with themselves other people, so that the ecosystem we end up creating is one of competency and excellence, not one of excuses and incompetence. I think in that everybody has a role to play. Our schools have a role to play, institutions have a role to play, families have a role to play, people in positions of power, authority, and influence have a role to play. All of you on this call have a role to play. I think the NSRCEL and how the work that you're doing with so many entrepreneurs, not just as part of this program, but other programs, the fact that 10 or 15,000 entrepreneurs have been touched by at least one of your programs says to me that there have been 10,000 opportunities at least to create a different mindset. And I think if we work only on saying that it is the mindset of the women that has to change, I think we are missing a very big point. The larger point today is that most decisions are taken by men, because most of the senior positions anywhere, whether it is policy making, etc., are held by men. And unless those men are made aware of their biases, and unless those men are held accountable for doing what they say, things are going to progress very slowly. And therefore, I think all of us, especially in academic institutions, which have a different environment, have to really do whatever we can to create an environment where it is about competency, fairness, and equity.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to change gears a bit. You spoke about the biases at BSc and NSC, and a little while ago, Professor Suresh talked about the valuations of Nykaa and latent view as they went IPO. There's a question here that speaks to many entrepreneur cohorts seem to focus a lot of time and energy on valuation, pitching, VCs, and so on, rather than dealing with entrepreneurs on how to build value. What is your guide to an entrepreneur to build value into its enterprise?
Well, simple logic would tell you that unless you have built sustainable value in your business model, you're unlikely to get a high valuation. Now, we live in very strange times where, right now, my personal view is there is too much liquidity, too much exuberance. Everybody feels that they are the ones who are going to become the unicorn and they are the successful ones. I think we have to see how the story plays out and perhaps have this conversation in a few years from now and see, how many of those really survive. Forget about this. If you look at, there was a recent study I was reading, I think BCG or somebody had done this analysis, that if you look at the Fortune, the FTSE 100 companies or the Fortune 500 companies, more than 40 or 46% of them, have only been in that list in the last decade or so, which means that 46% of the other companies have gone out of that list.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, I think what we are really saying is, and it is so basic that, sometimes you wonder how we're missing it, is that if the business itself is not capable of generating value, and what do we mean by generating value? Of generating, a positive return on investment, of generating cash flow, of generating enough value to be able to carry on and grow and reinvest in its business. Fees don't go up just because, some private equity company has come and said, okay, here's more money, take more money. Yes, you can take more money. But if as an entrepreneur, I feel that cost of capital is zero, and this money that is coming to me so easily today has no cost, then we are mistaken. Everything has a cost. And in the end, good economics will always win over poor economics.
Fascinating point. I'm going to speak to a little bit about your background in consumer markets and consumer markets globally. A lot of our entrepreneur cohorts, even in the call today and in the 2-day summit next couple of days, are looking at building consumer brands with a D2C business model. And that seems to be quite a trend over the past couple of years or so. And we've seen some very exciting brands and very exciting successes. Your interpretation of this, our ability to build consumer brands out of India, potentially that are global brands, and you've been part of those journeys yourself.
I think first of all, we have to demonstrate our ability to build, good or great brands in India for the Indian market. This is a very large market. I mean, the whole world is waiting to come to India. And yes, I mean, I think if we have proven our ability to create brands and take them out of India, that's great. But I would say the first thing is that you've got to have the ability to develop the right products for your own market. And I think, whether it's consumer marketing or industrial marketing or anything else, the fundamental principles don't change. I think in FMCG, the big disruptor, and it's a positive disruptor that has happened, is that your physical distribution systems, which used to be the moat or which used to be the competitive advantage for a large number of companies, are slowly receding to the background because you've got e-commerce that has made it very possible for B2C to happen without anybody else in the middle. And if you look at the behavior of how Indians are buying, I'm astounded every time I look at numbers, and I keep wondering where these people have time to look on Instagram and to look on all kinds of social media, the kind of stuff that happens. But in a way, that is giving very good tailwinds to entrepreneurs, which is to say, if I've got a good quality product and I've got an e-commerce platform that enables me to take it from where I make it to my end consumer, that's a very big breakthrough. And there are many brands. I mean, Nykaa itself is an example of that brand. It started digitally and it created its physical stores much later. There are so many other brands. I mean, in the personal care space, you just have to look up the net and, using natural ingredients and using this and that. Food is another thing. And, this pandemic, if anything, has really helped industries like that. The number of people who've gone into the food delivery business, right from the big cloud kitchens to the little kitchen at home, which is supplying you specialized whatever, desserts and quiches and fresh salads and so on. And I know you've got someone from Freshworks, as part of the people who are talking. So the ability of an entrepreneur, different from a professional, is entrepreneurs have an ability to spot an opportunity which might not be visible to other people. And they also have that ability then to make that opportunity relevant. And successful entrepreneurs are those that move from there to creating a business model that is capable of generating cash on an ongoing basis, thereby generating returns for all its stakeholders.
Thank you. Probably maybe a minute for a last question. You did exhort us as part of NSRCEL and IIM Bangalore and as part of the ecosystem to overcome biases, to provide the platform for women entrepreneurs. Today on the call, outside of my colleagues from IIM Bangalore, we've got my colleagues from the broader entrepreneurship ecosystem. We've got participants from the government, a couple of policymakers, a lot of people from the media and the press. Your advice or direction for us as we hope to build this platform and ecosystem that we've set ourselves up for as a vision, what's your direction for us? What should we be looking out for, and what should probably we not be doing?
My wish list given that you have already established a great reputation for what you do and how you do it. My personal wish list really would be, can we find models of scaling this up? You know, instead of taking I don't know, 7 years to reach 10,000 or 15,000 people, you know, how can we, you know, double, quadruple that? Using the benefit of what we've learned and what we know, using the benefit of technology, creating perhaps other models whereby the benefit of what people get when they associate with the NSRCEL and IIM Bangalore is actually amplified. Because I think the demand is far greater than, you know, what you're able to do is my hypothesis. Because there are many people, and you know, some of those might require a soft touch, some of them might be a light touch, some of that might be a more involved engagement, etc. So I would say, given the experience that we've had, this is as good a time as any other to step back, reflect on those things that have worked, those things, you know, that have not worked as well, and say, what might be the way to actually scale this up so that more and more people benefit from the insights that you've developed and the fabulous work that has gone on in the last few years.
Thank you, ma'am. That is truly inspiring. Ma'am Vinita Bali, it's been an absolute pleasure and a half an hour with you. It sets the stage for the next couple of days. And I say this sincerely, I do hope we live up to your ambitions first. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And once again, thanks for the opportunity to interact with all of you. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ganesh sir. Thank you very, very much, Vinita ma'am. That was an incredible conversation. What I actually took back, you know, as an excerpt from your conversation was the fact that you, being the creator of a model like this that brings so many people in together from all across the globe, all walks of life, women in particular, what I found so interesting is, and I don't mean to, like, you know, genderize this whole thing, but the fact that, Ganesh sir, you actually asked for direction. Thank you very much for that. Because in a world that we live in, where we've been, you know, constantly told that men don't ask for direction, thank you very much for being the voice of change. Thank you.